it's going to not be woke, and it's going to be a real Snow White. Probably my favorite part about this is they were going to release it at the same time as Disney.
The whole Panderverse, which is kind of a funny theme throughout, as they're pandering to the woke sensibilities of diversity.
But we know Disney in general has said 50% of their protagonists are going to be from marginalized groups within a few years.
So it's part of that.
That includes
diversity, equity, inclusion kind of narrative. Disney's turn to the left has created a great opening for a company that's not going to do that.
Yeah. And that's
to take that space.
And so now that provides an opportunity. It doesn't have anything to do with bigotry. Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Today, we're talking about Hollywood and Disney's growing list of challengers. There seem to be more and more popping up. So we've seen more evidence in just this past month, which is October, November, that U.S. audiences are just getting tired of Hollywood C-suite executives, CEOs, all that stuff, pushing social change in their movies. People just want entertainment.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So there's been all sorts of things. Let's start with the Snow Whites. How about that? So, okay. Andrew, can you just briefly, for the audience, explain what's going on with these Snow Whites?
All right. So it started out with a red carpet event.
And that was like a year ago, even.
It was. And the Disney Snow White was...
Rachel Ziegler is the actress, and Gal Gadot was with her.
Right. So Rachel Ziegler, who was going to be Snow White, and I think they replaced her, didn't they?
No, they replaced her on a different project.
Oh, okay.
Gal Gadot's?
She's the evil queen.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyways, so she was talking about how Snow White, the Disney Snow White, is not going to be your average Snow White, and she's going to be a boss, and she don't need no man.
Right. That's almost exactly what she says. It's crazy.
And, well, as we all know, that's not Snow White.
Right.
And there's a lot of uproar about that, and people are like, we don't really want that. Well, lo and behold, Daily Wire comes out with their Snow White, starring Brett Cooper, who is the host of the comment section on Daily Wire.
Yep.
Fantastic podcast if you want to go check out Brett Cooper.
Yeah, and maybe understand what young people are talking about.
Yes, yeah, she's really good for that. But she is going to play Snow White and the Evil Queen.
Right.
And Disney's version was Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. And of course, Brothers Grimm is open source.
Yeah.
The Disney version with the Seven Dwarves is kind of proprietary, but the story in general can be utilized by anybody.
Yeah, you can still have Snow White. You just can't have them sing hi-ho, it's off to work we go.
Indeed. But so Daily Wire and Bent Key, which is their
children's wing.
Yeah, and they're putting this version of Snow White together.
Right.
Yeah. And it's going to not be woke, and it's going to be a real Snow White.
Who's looking for her prince.
As it's intended, as the story intends. And probably my favorite part about this is they were going to release it at the same time as Disney.
Disney had locked down the window for a long time. It had been planned March 2024. This movie's coming out. And then Benke announces we're doing ours same time window.
Yep.
And then
Disney's like, oh, wait, we need to revisit some things and, we're going to rewrite a few things and improve it. And we're not going to release till 2025.
Yeah. So they literally just moved it a full year out just to avoid having to compete with the better version that's going to be coming out.
Seriously, can you imagine an upstart? And I mean, I love Daily Wire, but in the grand scheme of things, they're an upstart in comparison to the legacy of Disney. Can you imagine them killing Disney at the box office?
I would have loved it
during the same time.
I'm so upset that we don't get.
Clearly, they were afraid of that.
Well, absolutely.
Do you think that this pushing it back? I mean, in one sense, it'd be one thing to push it back to like June rather than March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to push back an entire year, are they refilming this thing?
Well, so that's the other thing, is that early on in the production, a picture from the set was leaked. Yeah. And it was Snow White and her 7 magical hobos. Because if you saw this picture, and maybe we can try to put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
It was this actress, Rachel Ziegler, who just just so you know, she's got darker skin. Like, she's a very attractive girl, but she does not have skin as white as snow, which is where the term Snow White comes from. And all the dwarves were tall, short, young, old, gay, straight, seemingly, just from their outfits.
They were quite diverse.
Men, women, it was just, these are not all dwarfs. And like in the original story, I don't know that it says this explicitly. I'm certain in some versions it does, but the dwarves are brothers, right? Or they're family. Mm-hmm. That's why they live together. So it's just absurd to have them be all these different races.
Now, I am ignorant of the Brothers Grimm original fairy tale. Mm-hmm. Are there dwarves in the original fairy tale?
She does go live with some dwarves. I think Disney greatly expanded on that aspect, but there is that. That's part of the original story. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One side note, I think it's so ironic that Snow White, which when Disney released the cartoon version, the original one, it was one of those things where everyone told Walt Disney that it was going to be a failure, that it was going to destroy the brand, and it has ultimately it ended up being, I think, maybe the best movie they ever made, or like was the savior of Disney at that time.
I mean, it's the only movie to have ever won 8 Best Picture Oscars, because it won 1 real one and then 7 dwarf ones.
Wow.
That's actually true. That's not that's what they actually gave Walt Disney 7 dwarf
awesome.
statuettes for that movie.
But just to think,
what year did that come out?
1937, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
See, you always pull up these questions I'm not prepared for.
I derailed.
Yeah, 1937. There we go.
Okay.
But Disney staked everything on this, and it just seems like such an affront to the legacy.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can dig into that a little bit more. More places where what we're seeing today is an affront to the legacy of those organizations, but such an affront to take this film that was the saving grace of Disney and then just like, we're going to rewrite it.
Yeah.
What?
And on top of all that, it also paved the way for animated movies in general. This was the first big animated release. It really let the world know that animation was a possible way to make a movie. Mm-hmm. Before that, it wasn't really. There were some animated things, but the tone was very different. It was usually more adult focused, and it was usually a little bit more like, it was, weird looking, that kind of stuff, like Ed, Edd and Eddy kind of stuff was more what was going on before Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And then that came out, and it was like, animation can be beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse, yeah.
It's funny looking.
Right. But even like in that original Mickey Mouse cartoon, it's a little bit weird.
Willie.
You get where he's like abusing a cow to make the steamboat go or something. It's weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the big ones. Thomas, we all just watched something, right? So do you want to outline that and that kind of challenge?
I don't. Okay.
I mean, you don't have to outline this episode. Just
I'm not going to
outline
the episode. Well, I watched an episode of South Park because it's this episode that deals with Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, the episode is called Into the Panderverse.
Into the Panderverse, right. And so
most of us don't watch South Park.
No, none of us do.
Well,
don't necessarily recommend that you do, but
but this episode we
relevant.
Decided it was worth it.
It was relevant.
It's playing off of a lot of different themes. Obviously, the whole multiverse theme, of course, has been really popular, especially with Marvel movies.
Oh yeah.
So you've got that aspect of it, and the whole Panderverse, which is kind of a funny theme throughout, as they're pandering to the woke sensibilities of diversity.
Well, they say they're pandering to everybody, and that is kind of what they're trying to do.
Right. And so the show's
left out.
This show's kind of, this episode was mocking that, and mocking, I guess the idea was that Kathleen Kennedy had been destroying
these beloved franchises.
Yeah, these franchises because she had her woke ideology, supposedly. Well, the character did, at least.
And for those who don't know, who is Kathleen
Kennedy?
Well,
Kathleen Kennedy has quite an impressive resume. She has worked with both George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
She's actually kind of Lucas's protege.
Right. She started her own production company, she and her husband at one point. She is what is her title at Disney? I mean, when Disney bought Lucasfilms,
she's the president of Lucasfilm.
Right.
So Lucasfilm is an important part of Disney.
Right.
So
when Disney bought it in 2012, I think they bought Lucasfilm, and she went along with that. And so she's been, I guess, basically being the head of Lucasfilm still.
Yeah, ever since. And she was always important in Lucasfilm, but it was under George Lucas. And so with George Lucas, you had someone who cared about the story, and so he hired Kathleen Kennedy to do everything else. And now, with the lack of story in the movies, we're seeing you need the George Lucas part of that partnership.
Yeah, but this is particularly relevant to her connection through Disney, and then what we just mentioned about Snow White.
Yeah.
Right. So here's my question, because honestly, I don't know Kathleen Kennedy personally, and I don't even know what her ideology, worldview is, anything. I mean, other than it seems like it's probably woke. At least the episode, that's what they came across. Is the episode made a joke of like every character she wanted replaced with a gay woman of color.
Well, we know Disney in general has said 50% of their protagonists are going to be from marginalized groups within a few years.
So it's part of that.
That includes Kathleen.
Diversity, equity, inclusion kind of narrative. So the episode effectively mocks that.
Yeah,
that's what it is. And I guess my question is regarding Disney. Everyone, I do know this. It's seemingly like every Disney fan, especially Star Wars fan of the older stuff, blames her for ruining Star Wars.
Well, yeah, she definitely deserves a lot of the credit for ruining Star Wars, in my opinion. As a huge Star Wars fan for most of my life, and still am, but not of the current stuff.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, I mean, as the head of the company, obviously the buck stops with you, and so whatever's happening with the company, you've directly directed that, or you've allowed it to happen and haven't stopped
through negligence, is what I think is probably, like with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, episodes 7, 8, and 9. I think negligence on Kathleen's part was the biggest problem, not establishing a story head to come up with a story for a trilogy. I think that was her biggest failure there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know how to judge that on directly because I'm not sure how those studios work, but you're going to get the blame if you're the head of the company for what results from the company. Yeah. And because, I mean, the episode does make a joke about how the last like 5 or 6 films have all been duds, and the company is, Disney itself is in the executive Iger is actually there. And he's like, what are we going to do to stop this? You know, our company's starting to.
Yeah, the line they say is actually, we keep making the same movie, and people aren't coming out to see them. What's wrong?
Right. So, I mean, it was an entertaining episode.
Yeah, it was very funny.
Anyway, I don't know what.
But yeah, the whole kind of deal with this episode has been, since it came out, there's been rumors swirling, and I can't find anything official, so we can't say anything more than rumors. But rumors that Kathleen really, really got upset by this episode. Because apparently she cares a lot about her legacy and wants to be remembered as a great part of American filmmaking. And right now, Kathleen, it does not look like you will be remembered that way. Certainly, I, as a Star Wars fan, am not ready to forgive you for what you've done to Star Wars. I'm very offended by that.
Well, you know, I got to say, you know, in spite of the things that she clearly has done, it's so interesting when folks on the left ideology, if she is of that for sure, as it seems to be, she's kind of walking in lockstep with what we would expect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she was born in Berkeley, California.
Right. So they say the left has no humor. All you have to do when you get made fun of in this kind of an instance is just laugh at yourself and embrace it, or come back with a better joke. I mean, come on. Getting angry again, if she is actually angry. If you're not actually angry about it, just let the world know. But, you know, if she is in fact really angry about this, then you're just basically letting South Park rub it in by getting mad about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I hate talking rumors when we don't actually have actual...
Yeah, official quotes.
I mean, it's...
But the specific rumor I saw, and I tried to find this quote, but it seemed like it was a leak from someone who actually spoke to her or had a quote from her, was that she was basically saying she's going to double down on this stuff. Again, it's a rumor.
On the DEI characters?
Replacing characters with gay, lame women.
Okay.
Which is the line from the episode.
Yeah. It's Cartman.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, I don't think Disney gets out of this kind of, I don't know if I would call it a tailspin, but it's not going to get itself out of this negative media too
Negative
soon.
turn, yeah.
Yeah, negative turn too soon.
Well, to add on to that, there's another movie from Disney coming out right now. The reviews are out. I don't think it's in theaters quite yet. Is The Marvels, and people you're seeing all these articles saying is the MCU in trouble? And so this Marvels movie is currently sitting at I think a 68 Rotten Tomatoes or 61, which is not good.
Is that by critics or is that by audience?
Critics.
Okay.
So it's 62, and that's actually, it's gone up because at first all the critics were panning it, and now more critics are coming in saying that it's okay. No one's really saying it's a great movie, but like there was one line that I really liked. Well, here's one. Thankfully, the movie clocks in at a mere 105 minutes. The Marvels doesn't have much to say, but at least it says it quickly. From the top critic.
Wow.
So
that's
another line, a narrative and visual jumble.
Goodness. Has Disney had any success in the last few years? Box office hits?
That's I mean, and that's what I'm kind of wanting to bring us back to. So long as they're making money from these films, even if they're not making the gobs of money that maybe they had from earlier stuff, if she's heading the ship and they're still making money, it's going to be viewed as a success. I think. Yeah. It's only when, even though critically acclaimed movies, they're not generating those like they were in the past, and they are generating a lot of like people just frustrated with the whole forcing of the woke agenda on everything, and the ruining of Star Wars, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But she's going to be looked at as successful if they're still making money.
Well, and largely they are. They've seen some big failures recently. They opened this big, giant Star Wars-themed hotel in one of their parks, and 1 year later they were closing it down because it was just absurdly overpriced. So they're seeing some failures, but in general, Disney is so big, they can take a licking and keep on ticking. They're going to keep making money hand over fist because they own youth entertainment in America, basically.
It will be interesting, and maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but maybe they pushed off their remake of Snow White an extra year, possibly to see the reception of Daily Wire Snow White, to see how that goes, if it does well, really well, or if it bombs or whatever, and to see even how they kind of handle the story. I think they're also stinging from, even before Daily Wire jumped in on this, I think they're stinging from the negative criticism they got from,
from Rachel Ziegler insulting the original.
That for sure, but also when the photos came out of the dwarves and everybody's like, is this a joke? And they're like, no, that was real. And now I noticed that, I think it was this week or last week, they released their first kind of image of it, and guess what?
They're dwarves again.
They're dwarves again. Yeah. And they look
they're animated.
They're animated CGI dwarves or whatever. So it's, to me, I'm wondering if they're going back and starting to say, okay, we went too far. Yeah. Let's pull this back. Let's get this thing, more closer to the original story again.
Yeah. And that's, I guess that's a win. What I want them to do is learn their lesson and realize we're in the business of making entertainment, not moving the culture. I don't think that's the lesson they're learning. I think it's maybe just go slower. That's a win, I guess. I'll take it. But I want them to learn, keep your business out of politics. Focus on entertainment and making just solid, entertaining stories.
I think that ship sailed at Disney back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They've committed themselves to a certain path for now.
Well, it wasn't as obvious until they engaged against Ron DeSantis in Florida.
Well, yeah, that was more lately. Stuff has come out that's been more explicitly political. But what I'm talking more is the culture war, which Disney charted out in the 90s. They started charting this culture war that was consistently moving to the left. And I think that...
But their saving grace for that decade and the next one was they were making excellent movies. Beauty and the Beast came out in the 90s, and it's widely regarded as one of their best ever movies.
Yeah, and I'm not saying so much... It wasn't... I think it kind of has hit the movies later.
Yeah.
But the Disney Channel, which had all kinds of shows and stuff, that's where you started to see more early on this kind of cultural drift leftward. And then it's more in the last decade, we've seen it impact their big main movies now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the reason they did that to some degree is you had to get the culture so far before it became safe to be doing this more in the big stuff.
Yeah.
I think. But it's almost like like we've said lots of times with the woke, the problem with the woke, a lot of it is it just gets ridiculously preachy. Yeah. And it's no longer like entertainment or anything. You're just like, oh, I feel like I'm being told or scolded all the time.
Yeah. And building on something you said just before that is they had to get to the point where it's okay to put this stuff in the movie. And that's what this ideology does. It takes an inch and an inch and an inch and an inch until you're so used to it that suddenly they can take a mile and you're like, wait, I don't like that. And they say, but look at all this stuff you agreed to. You know, this really isn't all that different. And you're like, oh, I guess I don't have a leg to stand on. That's what they do. That's the plan.
It's like the frog boiling in the water.
Exactly. So just know that about these people. That's what they're intending to do, is push you just a little bit enough until they can go all the way.
But Disney's turn to the left has created a great opening for a company that's not going to do that.
Yeah.
And to take that space.
And that's what Benke is explicitly trying to do.
That's what they're doing.
They said in their opening trailer, they said, we know we're not Disney. We're not what Disney is now. But, you know, Disney wasn't what it is now 100 years ago either. So we're going to start now, and we'll see where we are in 100 years. Hopefully we're in the same place Disney is now.
And they're actually listening to what people want.
Yeah. And they're not, you know, Jordan Peterson talked to the head of the Daily Wire. What's his name?
Jeremy Boring.
Jeremy Boring, yeah. And I listened to that conversation, and Peterson
was it
levied
boring?
No, it was not boring.
Okay.
Peterson levied the appropriate question, which is, okay, so you don't like all this leftist stuff, politics in movies and stuff. So isn't what you're doing just the opposite of that, just putting conservative politics in the media? And Jeremy's answer was, no, that's not what we're doing. Yes, we are conservatives, and yes, we are not engaging in this leftist stuff, so it's going to be conservative compared to that stuff. And sometimes we're going to affect it just because of the way we think about stories and the way we write stories. But these stories are meant to just be stories. They're not meant to be preaching at you. So they've got the Snow White movie. They've announced a Pendragon series that they're doing, which is about King Arthur. It's based on a book series. And they're spending a lot of money on it. And then they've got all these other shows on their Bentkey, which is already online, bentkey.com.
Lots of kids shows they've curated.
Yeah.
They're doing a streaming service thing now.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to push back against his explanation a little bit because I understand why he's saying it the way he's saying it. Like we're not coming in with an obvious agenda to push an ideology. Yeah. But nobody lives without an ideology. You have a worldview. And your worldview is going to inform the decisions you make and the products you produce. It will. And so, in one sense, that will come through. There's going to be a value system that's going to be present in these films.
And he like I said, he does kind of acknowledge.
Yeah. And so the difference is you major on the story, and that story, a well done story, follows the classic story format, and there generally is going to be moral conundrums that are addressed by characters. That's just how stories happen.
Right. And what you believe to be right and wrong is going to affect how your characters behave.
Right. I'm sure what he's getting at to a point too is we're not going to go and have gay characters because we need, Hollywood says you need gay characters or something like that. I mean, the character sexuality shouldn't even be an issue in most of these stories, and especially when you're talking about kids stuff.
Yeah.
It's non-existent. I remember that in the cartoons back in the day, that was never a thing to be. I mean, there were characters that were male and female, but that was it. There wasn't. And
well, you do have things. You did used to have this thing where there's these subtle jokes that are usually for mom and dad.
Right.
That are, so you're watching the movie in theaters with your kids, and your kids are enjoying the movie, and you're just kind of tuning out. And then there's some just tiny bit risque innuendo that a kid is never in a million years going to pick up on, but the adults can laugh at. So it keeps them engaged. So there's always been some of that. But what they're doing now is more directing it at the kids.
Now, question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. I noticed that on BenKey there's quite a few, it looks like, cartoons and shows. It's not just cartoons.
Yeah.
Animation stuff. Who are these animators or show?
Yeah, so a lot of these are not BenKey originals.
Yeah, they're curated from all over the world.
From all over the world. So they watch these shows and they're like, yes, this is something I'd be fine with my kid watching for half an hour or 2 hours or whatever.
Okay.
There are a couple that are their originals. I think this one, Chip Chilla, is an original for them.
Okay.
And Kid Explorer, I think, is an original for them. And then there's the Miss Mabel one. Or Mabel McClay, I think, is theirs as well.
Okay.
But then most of these are just curated, not originals.
Okay, so it's almost like they're...
It's a streaming service.
Yeah, they're doing kind of like a Netflix model here.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do.
Okay.
So earlier you were talking about... you gave me such a great segue and I missed it. But anyhow, Thomas did. The thing Disney is facing is that these stories just aren't working. And so now you're seeing more and more of these challenges. Oh, it was about Jeremy Boring. It was about your response to that. So... yeah, you're going to get some message across no matter what you do. But if you focus on the story, you'll make a good story.
Right.
If you focus on the message, you'll make a bad story. So that's something we've kind of seen. And we've seen challenges to Hollywood for a long time now. It's been a few decades where there's been some serious people trying to make movies outside of Hollywood. One of the first, I guess, successful ones was Firm Studios, who made the movie Fireproof, and they've made a few other movies since then. And Fireproof was made by this guy, Alex Kendrick, and his family, and I think his church.
Yeah.
And they made a few other movies as well, Flywheel, Facing the Giants, Courageous. Mm-hmm. Those all were popular within the Christian community.
Yeah. They were all like good stories, but they were kind of low quality acting, that kind of stuff.
And going back to what Thomas said, have you seen any of these?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, I've seen, I think all the ones I just listed. I've seen. They were good stories in the sense that they were virtuous stories, but I always found them to be just overtly preachy, just like you should read the Bible because you're a Christian and Christians should read the Bible and that's what God tells you to do.
It's like
that's correct and that's virtuous, but it's not entertaining.
It's almost like the conservative version of woke in the sense of like we have an agenda, we have a message, and we're going to try to fit a story around it and feed it to you.
And we're not attacking these people. They did a good job with what they were trying to do. They made successful movies, and they were trying to just get something out there that wasn't preaching bad morals to your kids, so you could have something to turn on. So absolutely no hate on them, but you can do things better. And we're seeing some people do it better now. And Affirm Studios has gotten better as well. One of their more recent movies is Paul, Apostle of Christ, which came out in 2018. I saw that one. It has Jim Caviezel playing Luke, and it's about Paul's last days in the Roman prison right before he gets beheaded, and the early church in Rome. And so if you just want to know, if you want to get to kind of experience what the days of the early church were like in Rome, where it was secret and you could be killed for being a Christian, that's a great movie to watch. And it's actually a good drama. It's not the best movie you've ever seen, but it's not overly preachy or anything. It's just a good drama. But now we're seeing some more studios, right?
Yeah, and we'll include some of these in the show notes for those who are interested if you want to learn more. Another studio is the Angels Studio.
Right.
And they're pretty well known right now.
Because they had that big movie this year.
Yes.
Were they also the one that is The Chosen?
Yeah, I was going to mention they're particularly well known, at least in the Christian community, for The Chosen, which is an account of Jesus's life.
Yeah. Oh, well, his ministry age life. Yeah.
Correct.
With the apostles.
With the apostles, yeah.
Or disciples, I guess, at that time.
But then their big movie this year was Sound of Freedom with Jim Caviezel. And they've got another movie coming out December 1st, The Shift. That one, I'm excited to see.
What is that supposed to be about? What's
the trailer that I saw is set, this guy has died, and he's talking to this actor we were talking about earlier, Neil McDonough, who's known as the benefactor. And he's talking to this guy, and he's like, you're dead, but you can accomplish something. I'm not exactly sure what, but it's basically Neil McDonough seems to be a villain manipulating this guy to do stuff. And I think the movie's about him trying to get out from under this guy's clutches while dead all the while. So sounds interesting to me. Pretty good premise. I'm interested. And Neil McDonough is an actor I like anyhow.
Yeah, he's a good actor.
He was one of the Howling Commandos in Captain America: The First Avenger, and he's been in lots of stuff besides that.
Band of
Band of Brothers. He was the villain in one of the seasons of the Arrow TV show. He's a good actor. So I'm glad to see them getting some quality actors. And yeah, The Chosen's the other one that's been very successful. And it has been.
What network or what streaming service is that on?
It was on Netflix.
The Chosen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe it was, but I thought that they were streaming exclusively on their app, Angel Studios.
Oh, they've got their own app now.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have their own streaming app.
I feel like everybody's got their own app now.
It might have been on Netflix.
When are we going to get
it looks like it's on Netflix
app
right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
and Prime Video, apparently.
All right. Well, maybe out the gate it was just on streaming on the Angel Studios.
Well, maybe it got, if it gets enough popularity, Netflix, might pick it up or something.
And just to touch on that real quick, of course, as Christians, the subject of Jesus and depicting him on screen is very touchy. It's not like with Muslims where you can't depict him at all, but you need to be respectful. Sure. And that's been the, I think, most impressive part of this.
I'd say so. And it's gotten all kinds of reviews, even outside of the Christian community, of, man, this is just a depiction of Jesus. Like, I never even knew that he could be so approachable and real. And, I've heard accounts of it actually drawing people's interest in learning more about Jesus.
Right. You're right. I know it happened as well. And yeah, but that's just my point, that you don't have these churches coming out and saying, don't watch The Chosen, it's a horrible depiction of Jesus, because, people have some quibbles here and there, but in general, it's met with, that's a reasonable way to depict Jesus. That's not blasphemous or anything, that's a tough line to walk, and they're doing it, which is very impressive. The other studio that's been kind of challenging has just put out their first movie, and they've got more that they plan to make eventually, no official releases, but is the Robertson family. We talked about them.
Yeah, and they just did The Blind, which we reviewed a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of kind of like new media in the sense of, what we're doing here, but like the Daily Wire has obviously been very successful with, and, the internet has allowed for the challenge of the big boys at the top. Yeah. And when the big boys start failing or start dropping the ball, as it were, that just presents more opportunities. Yeah. And it's kind of exciting to see these new studios starting to pop up and saying, hey, we're willing to make these movies that Hollywood would never make.
And isn't that what America is about?
Yeah.
This is the land of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it's about, when new things can come about and challenge the status quo.
Right. And it's when you stop catering to one group, someone else can come in and cater to that group. And that's what you saw in the early days of the American colonies, with some colonies being Catholic only, some colonies being Protestant only. And they both experienced massive growth because you had Protestants fleeing Catholic countries and Catholics fleeing Protestant countries. And now you're getting more of the Disney's seemingly only pandering to effectively everyone but white people. Yeah. Is kind of what they say, straight white people specifically. Mm-hmm. And so now that provides an opportunity. It doesn't have anything to do with bigotry, but it provides an opportunity for all these other companies to be in like, okay, well, what do straight white people want to see? We'll make some of that, and then we'll make money because they're not getting it anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And that's just natural. That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's the free market.
Yeah. I think we covered everything a little bit. So what have we talked about today, guys?
The big Disneys and, the big Hollywood entertainment studios of the world of America are more and more just pandering. They have entered the Panderverse.
Yes.
And, people don't want that stuff.
Yeah. Well, at least enough people don't want it that it's creating this counter Hollywood, basically.
And there's a lot of money going into these alternatives.
Yep.
And this new media, as you said, Thomas. And that kind of investment doesn't happen for no reason.
Exactly. Yeah, it happens because people are going to see it. Mm-hmm. We talked about the Snow Whites, Brett Cooper and Rachel Ziegler, one of whom appreciates the original and is grateful for the role, and one of whom does not seem to be grateful at all.
Do you know if the Daily Wire is planning to try to release it in theaters?
Oh, yeah. They're trying to release it in theaters. Okay. I mean, they're going to have to negotiate and all that. We'll
Right,
see how many
okay.
theaters they manage to get, but they're definitely trying to.
So that'll be a film we'll have to review when it comes.
Yes,
We will.
absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
We talked about Bent Key, that's related to Snow White. We talked about Angel Studios and people creating movies like The Sound of Freedom or shows like The Chosen.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about some of the people who kind of paved the way for this, Affirm Films, that whole church that made all those movies we discussed. Facing the Giants was maybe their first big hit. And then, of course, the Robertson family, the Blind movie, and the Blind LLC is the name of the company.
And I think it's worth noting that in some ways, these are couched as alternatives, but they're really not. They're contenders.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's absolutely clear when you see that Disney just moved their movie back a whole year, seemingly for no reason except we don't want that competition. That's saying we're taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish they wouldn't. Yeah. And then, of course, we talked about South Park, which is maybe a first and only for our podcast.
Yes, indeed.
Because it's a rather crass show, but they have great satire on there.
Very relevant for this moment and, the Panderverse that we are observing.
And I will just add one last thing on the South Park thing. In that episode, at the kind of conclusion, you get Eric, who just hates Kathleen Kennedy, and Kathleen having to work together to get back to the correct universe. And he apologizes for writing all the hate mail, especially after the last Indiana Jones movie, he says. And he says he wrote all of it. She said, I was getting 11,000 hate mail letters a day. And he's like, I was doing 12, 13,000 a day.
Oh my gosh.
And, that's more directed at the people like me in the world who loved Star Wars and then at some point have decided this new Star Wars stuff, it's not for me. I don't like it. And they're very angry about it. And we're allowed to be angry about it, but, sending people hate mail, constantly calling them horrible names is, as they say in the South Park episode, leaving them with very few options other than to double down.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't drive people the wrong direction because of how angry you are that they're going the wrong direction. I guess that's kind of the message there.
Good takeaway.
Yeah. All right. So that was our discussion on Hollywood and Disney's growing list of challengers. Any last thoughts real quick?
Don't enter the Panderverse.
Don't enter the Panderverse. No. All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. We are brought to you by the Patriot Post, which you can find at patriotpost.us. Patriot Post is the oldest conservative online news, policy, and opinion digest. We hope you'll tune in next time. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.